As we lead up to Season 3 of Dying to Tell You, we've decided to re-release some earlier episodes of our guests who have died in an effort to highlight and honor those stories. If you've started listening recently, this is a way for you to catch up. If you've listened from the beginning, listen again and see if you, as I do, notice something new when you listen a second time. This week, we're re-releasing my interview with Rachel. This is a special one for me because Chris and I were able to meet Rachel in person when she was in Denver visiting family. What a joy Rachel was. The way that she lived with ALS was truly inspiring. Please enjoy this interview with Rachel.
I can't choose the ALS. The ALS is here and I can't do anything about that now. But I can choose what my perspective is going to be and how to then move on. Okay, I'm mad. I'm mad right now. I'm storming. No, I'm not storming anymore. I'm rolling around in my wheelchair and I am, crying at my partner and talking about how unfair this is. And okay, you have to do those things, but then you have to take a breath and you have to move forward.
I guess I knew that at some point I would have to come out and say it. Social media is great. I know it's a place that can be mindless and even harmful, and it has certainly taken more hours of my life than I would like to admit. But many of you are listening to this podcast because you learned about it through social media, and several of my guests are people that I met on social media. And today's guest is someone I met on social media. I met Rachel on TikTok, where she makes videos talking about her illness, the symptoms, how she's living with them, and sometimes complaining about it. Rachel is a bright spot, a breath of fresh air, and considering her illness, which I'll let her tell you about, she's adjusting her life incredibly well. This is a long episode, but there's really a lot of good information here. So settle in, go for a long walk, or take it in smaller pieces. But don't miss the lessons Rachel is teaching here today. Please enjoy this conversation with Rachel. This is Dying to Tell You. Maybe you could introduce yourself and tell us where you are in the world, and we'll go from there.
Okay. My name is Rachel. I live in Indiana, USA, and I have ALS.
ALS. Mm-hmm. So I think I know what that is, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about ALS.
Okay. So most people who haven't maybe heard of the disease ALS, which I think is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, they might be familiar with Lou Gehrig's disease. Lou Gehrig was a baseball player, and he had a fairly public diagnosis of ALS. And so now a lot of people will recognize Lou Gehrig's disease, even if they don't know what ALS is. And so ALS is a disease that affects the motor neurons in your body. Basically, it starts in our brains, right? So our brains send that signal down through our spinal cords and then into nerves throughout the rest of our bodies that will then move the muscle that we are asking it to move. There are some kinds of muscle that are not like controllable muscles, which is what ALS affects, those motor neurons. So like your cardiac muscle is not a motor neuron related muscle. Generally, your digestive tract is also not one that we can control ourselves. So we're talking about muscles that are ones that we can choose to move. I can choose to move my arm. I can choose to lift up my leg, things like that. And so what happens is that those neurons that are receiving the signals from our brain are gradually starting to die. And there's not really a great answer as to why scientists and physicians are continuing to study, but right now we just don't have a really good answer as to why they start to die. But the fact of the matter is that in ALS, those neurons do start to die. And so if those nerves die, they cannot conduct the signal from the brain to the muscles that we want to move. And so what we see with ALS is that our muscles aren't working very well, but really the issue isn't with our muscle, it's with those motor neurons. And so the scary thing about it is that not only are your arms and your legs motor neurons, you're controlled by motor neurons, but so is like the muscles in your face and in your mouth, and also your diaphragm, which is the muscle that helps you or makes you breathe. And so with ALS, everyone who has ALS eventually gets to the point where they cannot breathe by themselves and they require some sort of assistance. And so initially they try to do like non-invasive things, like with a CPAP. People are familiar with that. Or there's other non-invasive things, but eventually it gets to the point where those aren't enough. And so then they either put a trach into your throat, or they will just intubate you, which is where they put the tube through your mouth and down into your lungs. And that's a hard one because you usually have to be fairly sedated in order to tolerate that. So it's not anybody's real favorite choice, but the trach is what generally happens. Yeah. And so it also means then that you can't really eat on your own anymore. You can't really talk and communicate with people anymore. And so that's where you get those screens that you kind of look at the letters and you spell things out. That's what happens. You can't communicate, you can't breathe, you can't eat. And so people with ALS generally die. The typical prognosis is about 2 to 5 years after diagnosis. And we would die because we just can't breathe anymore.
Right. It's interesting. You said that it affects the muscles that you can control, right? Somebody recently told me that that breathing is like the bridge between the controllable and non-controllable muscles, right? Because you breathe, it's kind of an automatic thing for most people, but the reality is you can control it.
Right. If you want to take a deep breath.
Right. I can take a deep breath.
You can do that. Yes.
I can hold my breath. I can breathe really fast, you know. I mean, I knew that breathing was affected by that, but I didn't put it together that it was only muscles that you can control.
Right.
So maybe let's back up and talk about before you were diagnosed, before you started trying to figure out what was going on that you started to try to figure out what was going on. What was happening?
So probably about, it's probably been about 2 years ago now, I started having a lot of back pain. And I didn't know why it was. And I had seen my doctor about it a couple of times. And she, of course, doesn't want to continue to prescribe, pain medication or muscle relaxers or anything without having any idea what was going on. So she sent me to a pain clinic. And the pain clinic didn't really know what was happening either. So they just kind of put me in physical therapy and checked in on me, but the back pain wasn't getting any better. And I used to like to be pretty active. We have a bulldog, and who's down here at my feet chewing on her little hard, chewy thing. So if you happen to hear any like growling noises or something, it's snoring. It is my sweet little bulldog down there. Anyway, so we lived pretty close to a state park that had a lot of hiking trails. And so Peach and I used to go out almost every day, and we would hike on those trails. And I started noticing that my legs just felt weird. They felt kind of weak, and I just felt like I was hurting myself or falling more frequently. I noticed it at home too. Like my husband and I had, hang on just one second.
Sure.
See, this is one of those great edits. Hang on a second. Okay. We'll try that again. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
So Peach and I used to like to go and hike a lot. And also at home, my partner and I, we had like kind of just a little weekend gig at a club where it was basically our job to just make sure that the women felt safe in the club and that everybody was happy and having a good time. And so I would dress up in my cutest little club wear things and, my high heels and everything. And I just kind of talked to people all night, and that was a lot of fun until I started falling every time I had my shoes, my high heels on. And I thought to myself, okay, I am a grown-up woman. I have been wearing high-heeled shoes since, I was middle schooler or something, right? How in the world have I forgotten how to walk in high heels all the time? And it just kept getting worse and worse. And I thought, okay, well, the house that we lived in was an old house. It was 125 years old. And so the floors were not always as even as they might be in a newer home. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe it's on the floor or, and so I started wearing flat shoes until I got to the club. And then I would put my heels on during the night and kind of just make sure I was holding on to, like a railing or something. And then I would take them off and go home and try not to fall on things. But the fact is that I was falling more. And when I had Peach with me and we were hiking, I would trip over just random things all the time. I would slip and fall and land on my tush. And it was all just felt to me like it was getting worse. And so the pain management clinic had sent me to a physical medicine doctor. And so I remember saying to her that I just felt like my knees wanted to, like fold the wrong way, turn inside out. And also I was spraining my ankle all the time. I had this enormous, like grapefruit size knot on my ankle because I had sprained it so badly. And I just couldn't figure out what was causing that to happen. And over time, she couldn't really figure out what the issue was either. And so I just really felt like I was at a loss because I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know always how to communicate it effectively. And also I just felt like everybody was kind of poo-pooing me, like you're getting older, Rach. Maybe you just are hurting yourself more and your back hurts because you're getting old and, and so I just really wasn't finding any answers at all. And then this past October 2023, I had been outside helping my partner do some things in the yard. And as usual, I had tripped over something and I had fallen. And so I kind of just gave up for the afternoon because I was frustrated, and I went and I sat in my recliner. And after, sitting there for maybe an hour, all of a sudden, my entire left leg just went completely numb. And my left foot would not move anymore. And so I thought, well, maybe I am just sitting on it funny. Maybe my whole leg just fell asleep. And so I kind of tried to adjust my posture and how I was sitting. And eventually, kind of over maybe like an hour or a couple of hours, the feeling came back into my leg, but my left foot never started moving again. And of course, that made tripping over things way worse because now at that point I had foot drop, meaning that my toes would drag on the ground when I would walk. Instead of leading with my heel and going heel toe, I would end up just sort of being on my toe and then flattening my foot as I walk. So of course then I'm tripping more. And so I went to a mobility store. I got a brace. We call it an AFO, which is basically hard on the bottom, and then it comes up and wraps around your calf. And so it keeps your foot pretty flat. And so I got one of those, and I got myself a cane and tried to get along that way because my doctors still weren't listening to me. And that was really, really frustrating. So in November, I had my yearly OBGYN appointment. And when my doctor walked in, she saw the cane and she saw the brace that was in my shoe. And she said, "What's going on? You didn't have this the last time you were here." And I said, "No, I certainly didn't," which was great because, you see your OBGYN once a year if you're healthy. Or she was just really on the ball and paid attention. And we kind of talked about some tests that I had been asking my doctors to do, and they had refused to do for me. And so she scheduled for me my first test that got me on the road to diagnosis.
Wow.
It was exceedingly frustrating. And,
to say the least.
Yeah.
It's all in our hands, this life of time that's given to us all. It gathers round each night, each morn. We watch it pass and grow. It is all in our hands, it is all in our hands.
It's something that as a woman in America, it seems to be relatively common experience that, especially when you have male doctors, they tend to kind of poo-poo you when you say something hurts or that there's a problem. And I am a registered nurse. I have my bachelor's degree. I understand, where to go for appropriate research, and so I tried to show up to my doctor's appointments prepared and with appropriate questions. And it just was frustrating because I was doing more work than they were. And even when I provided them with documentation and studies and, hey, could we look at this? They just wouldn't. And everything was just really hard, and it took much, much longer than it needed to because I just wasn't taken seriously.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
It sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I've encountered this kind of like pushing things down the road, just kind of like, oh, you're just getting older. I mean, it happens a lot with people who are, everybody's getting older.
Sure.
But, well, I think some people, I mean, like you in the beginning, right? You're like, well, I don't know, maybe the floors are uneven. Oh, maybe I am getting older, or especially with people with like lung cancer or something, it's just like, oh, I can't do as much as I used to do, but that's to be expected. I'm, whatever, 60 years old or whatever.
Right.
And it's just hard to tell. Is this aging or am I sick?
Right.
So how long between the time when you started noticing the very beginnings of your symptoms to when you got your diagnosis in, what did you say, November of 23?
My diagnosis happened in December of 2023. And I would say it was probably 18 months maybe from when I started having back pain, and maybe about a year from when I started noticing that I was falling a lot. It took me about that long. Yeah. And really, I have been told that it is a disease that takes a while to be able to diagnose. And so I have been told that, waiting a year is not completely abnormal, but I also know several other ALS patients who have been diagnosed in months instead of the amount of time that I was. And I really think if the appropriate testing had been done, they would have discovered it much more quickly. So that's the frustrating part, because, when they say your estimated time of living, right, is 2 to 5 years from diagnosis. Well, for me, okay, now I've lost a year in trying to find that diagnosis. So now it's not that I'm 5 or 6 months out from diagnosis. It's now that I really am a year and a half, or maybe even 2 years if you want to take it all that way back. And so it just means that, of course, when you start taking medications, the sooner you take them, the more effective you are, or they are at helping you. And so I've missed out on all of that time, for the medications to be effective. And when you have a diagnosis that is terminal like this, and it's terminal fast like this, right? It's important to really be intentional about how you spend your time. So all of that time, I would have liked to have just been more, I don't know, like valuing that time rather than just like going through every day like it was just another day. Now that I know that there's a much sooner end date for my life, I feel like those are all days that I sort of missed out on, where I could have really been spending more intentional time with my family, or traveling, or, just the things that I wanted to do, versus just trying to rest and sitting and watching TV and, taking things easy so I wouldn't hurt myself. I feel like I was, I don't know, kicked out of that time or something. I don't really know how to describe it, but that feels really unfair to me because of that,
It feels unfair to me. And the thing that feels most unfair about that is that those were the months, those were the weeks and months that you were the most well.
Exactly.
You'll never be as well as you were at that time.
Exactly.
And so, in a lot of ways, you were robbed of that time. I have to say, I don't know. I'm just really sad. I'm really sad that it took so long, and I'm surprised that with you being a nurse and you having some medical literacy, that your doctors didn't take you more seriously.
Yeah. I almost think that, generally as nurses, we often do not tell other providers, other medical professionals. Right. We do not tell people that we are nurses, because people don't like to care for other medical professionals. And so I don't normally, unless I need to provide that information. And I got to the point with those doctors that I did tell them that, because, look, it's not like I'm Googling it and just taking any old website that pops up. I understand how to research, and I understand which organizations are trustworthy, and I understand how to read a scientific paper, and so it just, it's very difficult to to talk to doctors who can be just really confident in their own knowledge, and that sometimes makes them unable to consider someone else's ideas.
I wish
All right. So we talked yesterday about, on the phone, about this moment when you finally got your diagnosis. And I can imagine how it felt. Would you tell us kind of how that happened, and then how it felt within yourself to get that diagnosis?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, like I said, I had been to see my OBGYN, and initially I had asked her for a DEXA scan, which is a bone density test, because my mother has osteoporosis. And I thought, okay, well, my back hurts. I'm having issues with my leg and my foot. Maybe we're talking some kind of spinal injury, and I just need to have that checked to make sure. And so she said, oh, of course, I can put that in for you. That's really easy. So I had that DEXA scan. And then they send you to an orthopedic physician for you to have the results. And that doctor looked at all of my results, and she looked at my MRIs and everything that I had already had done. And she said, really, as far as your back goes, everything looks okay. I don't think that is what's causing the problem. And so I said, okay, what if we do an EMG, which is a test where they stick needles into your muscles, and they electrocute you and try to see how those muscles respond to those signals being put in. And so the next day, the orthopedic doctor called, and she said, have you seen your results? And I said, no, I haven't. And she said, okay, well, I know that you already have your own neurologist, but I have a different neurologist that I really enjoy working with, because he is very, very good at figuring out diagnoses that other doctors have not been able to figure out, right? So I said, that's great. Send me there. And so I went in, and he sat me down and talked to me about a lot of things. And he said, well, the doctor from your EMG said that he thinks that you have a motor neuron disease. And at the time, I didn't really know a whole lot about any motor neuron diseases. And he said, I'm not comfortable making any kind of a diagnosis until I do a few more tests. And between those two visits, I did what one should never, ever do. And that is Google what motor neuron diseases were. And I found out that they're pretty nasty little guys. But some of them I knew I could sort of knock out of the running because they're genetic, or they run only in men, or a couple things. So there are motor neuron diseases, and then there is motor neuron disease. So with all capital letters. And I did not associate that with ALS at the time, because the information that I was reading did not call it ALS. They called it motor neuron disease. And so when I went in the next morning, the nurse, who was just, oh, God bless her, she was just wonderful. And she sat with me while I just cried, because I had read on Google what motor neuron disease was, and that was terrifying. And she just helped me calm down. And she said, let's just take a few breaths. We're going to do the rest of the testing, and then we'll see what happens. And so Doc came in, we did all those tests that I mentioned, and then he sat me back up and he said, well, there are 3 motor neuron diseases that you could have. There is a motor neuron disease that affects your upper motor neurons, and there's one that affects your lower motor neurons. And so that's not just arms and legs, that's just different types of symptoms, really. And also then there is motor neuron disease, which he then told me was ALS. And he said, again, I don't want to absolutely diagnose you with ALS. I'm going to ask you to get a second opinion just to be safe. And so at that point, from the research that I had been doing, I was fairly confident that it was ALS, but we waited until the beginning of January, and we went to a special clinic where they only handle ALS patients, and they did a couple kind of quick and dirty tests, and they confirmed it then. And that was, boy, wow, it's like the floor drops out from under you. You know, you go from one day feeling like, I don't know, I have these weird symptoms, but still everything's generally okay. And, you know, I have my whole life in front of me, to thinking, oh my gosh, I have this degenerative disease that's only going to get worse, and it's going to kill me in the one way that I had always said I did not want to die. Not being able to breathe is the most terrifying thing for me. And so to be faced with a diagnosis that is going to result in that being the way that I die, it was just completely devastating to me. I cannot overstate how terrified I was and sad. I mean, the grief that comes from knowing that I won't be watching my children as they move forward in their lives, and being faced with the reality of telling my parents and my just lovely 98-year-old grandmother that they were going to have to watch me, you know, get worse and worse and eventually pass away, certainly before my parents and possibly before my grandmother herself too. And then telling them that there was nothing they could do to help make it better. There's nothing. It doesn't matter what kind of medicine or therapies you try. Nothing's going to make it better. And so they were going to have to watch me die. And, you know, and then telling my children that they were going to have to watch me die. Nobody wants to watch their parents die when they're in their 20s. And so it was just heartbreaking. As hard as it was for me to hear it myself, it was much worse to tell my family that this is what we were looking at. We found out right before Christmas, and so I decided that I wanted to talk to my family before Christmas, because I just didn't think I could get through the holiday pretending that everything was fine. I was heartbroken and terrified, and I didn't want to have to pretend with the people that I love that everything was okay. And so it certainly made the holidays more difficult than they would have been. But I had people supporting me that I would not have had otherwise. And so as hard as it was, I think it was the right choice. But boy, Cody, I tell you, it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. You know, it was just really terrible, hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Whew.
Yep.
I need to take a breath.
You know, I'm at the point now where I have told that story so many times. And I've lived with the diagnosis for almost 6 months now, I guess. And it doesn't make me normally tear up or freak out to talk about it. I mean, I think the hardest thing is when I have a new symptom or you know, I don't know, I fall, I can't, I wanted to go out, and my partner travels a lot for work, and he's going to be gone most of this week. And I thought to myself, oh gosh, I can't let the mailbox fill up. So it's right outside the front door. I can probably take that one little step and get it. And stepping out was fine. Stepping back up onto the step was impossible. I collapsed, you know, right there in my foyer. And when things like that happen, it sort of just brings home the progression of the disease, that's right now for me, that's the hardest part, because a lot of days I don't feel bad. I mean, I certainly have weakness in my legs. I pretty much consistently use a walker now, or I have a wheelchair. And I use those most of the time now, when I didn't have to, but on most days I don't feel sick, like we talked about the lung cancer thing earlier. People who have lung cancer after a while don't feel good, right? As they're entering terminal stages, they just feel awful. It's hard for them to breathe. They're uncomfortable all the time. For me, a lot of the time, I don't feel bad. I feel weak. I feel tired. I have to rest more, but I don't feel sick. And so when things happen that just reiterate to my own brain, that things are progressing, that's the hard part for me now. And so it's hard for other people to hear the story. But for me, it's just that occasional progression, like the day-to-day stuff that you're just a little bit weaker today, or, your oxygen's a little bit lower today. I don't notice those things as much, but it's gosh, I fell and now I can't get myself back up again. What do I do? Those things are just, that's the hardest thing for me right now. Yeah.
Wow. So this afternoon or this morning, I don't know, when you stepped out and fell back into your house, and you're there on the floor, I could just, I know where I would go in that moment. I know the emotions that would come up for me.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a whole host of emotions that come up, but what is it that goes through you when that happened?
I mean, the initial thing is, did I break anything? And how bad did I hurt myself?
Sure, yeah.
And, and so once you take that initial stock of your physical well-being, then boy, I have to sit back and take a breath and deal with the fact that this is now something that I'm never going to be able to do again. And that's a really hard thing. I know that I broke my hip back at the beginning of April. I broke my hip, and I'm sitting in the ED with my mom, the emergency room, and I'm in so much pain and I'm crying, and I just looked at my mom and I said, was today the last day that I was going to be able to walk? And I didn't know it. That's the thing. You just don't value what you have until it's not there anymore. Yeah. And so when things like today happen, I knew that I would be shaky on steps. I knew, whenever we stay in a hotel, and a couple weeks ago we were in Chicago and the fire alarm went off and we were on the 4th floor. My partner had to carry me down, pretty much carry me down 4 flights of stairs because I was not able to manage that. So I know that those are things, they're skills that are leaving, but every time it happens, I just am faced with that reality that I have to accept that there's this thing that I have always been able to do, and now I never will be able to do that again. And no matter how big or small that skill is, it's something you have to reckon with every single time, and it's painful. And, just to be faced with it brings home the knowledge that I am progressing. And, And even just a sort of a small thing like falling on the way in from picking up mail, which by the way was all junk mail today, so definitely not worth it.
Wasn't worth it.
Any time that is, it reminds you of your mortality, right? That this is happening, and I am going to die, and things are going to get worse until it gets to that point. And I mean, it can be very overwhelming. Fortunately, today it wasn't awful. I took my breath and I sat back for a minute, and then I thought, okay, I'm here by myself. Now what do I do? So can I get myself into my wheelchair, which I could. Fortunately, it was close enough, and I still have enough strength in my arms to be able to maneuver my body a little bit, even when my legs don't work. So I am grateful for that. And once I got back in my chair, I was able to take another breath and just be grateful that I still have that capability to be able to provide that for myself. I just really want to do as much as I can for myself until I can't anymore. Mm-hmm. And so every time I do accomplish something that I wasn't sure I'd be able to do, there is so much joy and pride that comes as a part of that. So like my partner and I, we have a motorcycle. And so we have always ridden together anytime the weather's nice. And this year, he's been kind of pushing me to get on it. And I've been sort of not wanting to, because I did not think I would be able to get myself on the bike. I certainly cannot throw my leg over the bike like I used to be able to do to get into the seat. I don't have a lot of strength to be able to scoot myself back. And I was afraid, because even just riding on the back, we have a Goldwing, so it's not like, I'm sitting cush, right? I mean, like I've got a back, and I've got armrests, and I got radio speakers, and I have a heated seat, for heaven's sakes, if it's too chilly. So, I mean, it's not like I'm struggling on the back of this, and it's not like I'm riding on the back of somebody's, like smaller motorcycle where I have to hold on and, really balance myself. But still, I was terrified to try and get myself on the bike, because it would just be one more example of something that I would not be able to do again. And that's something that's always been really important to us. It's my partner's favorite way to get out and blow off steam. And I know that it's important for him that I be there with him. And so he finally just pushed me into it. And I'll help you. Of course, he's just wonderfully supportive and helpful. And he did. He here's a couple of tips. We can try this. And it was much easier than I thought. And so we went out and got ice cream cones to celebrate and had a really nice ride on the bike. And so, every time that something good like that happens, any time that I accomplish something that I wasn't sure I would be able to do, it gives you at least a few moments of forgetting how hard this diagnosis is. And for a few moments, I can forget about the things that I've lost, and I can celebrate the achievement, even if it's a small thing, just like getting myself up into the wheelchair myself today. I was able to do it. I did it by myself. I didn't have to call somebody to come and, help. And so there is so much pride in the fact that I was able to handle it myself and do something that, was still a very difficult thing for me to do, but I managed it. And so, it kind of takes some of that negativity out of the situation for a while. And then I don't feel so bad about it,
Give me a black motorcycle, give me playback on a vinyl and some cheap aviators from 65. Give me snakeskin boots, skull swaying like a noose, and I'll be clinging to the back of this Indian bag. Brass rings in the Santa Ana wind with a red sunset going down. There's no lines on a gravel road riding where nobody goes, and I'm addicted to it.
Rachel, you're not very far into your diagnosis.
That's true.
And it seems like you've done a really good job of incorporating this information into your story. And you're both honoring the losses as they come and celebrating the victories as they come. I guess I'm wondering, how are you doing this? I mean, is there therapy or psychological practices or spiritual practices or do you just have something inside of you that is
yes,
making
it's my
this
intestinal
possible?
fortitude.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, listen, I don't really have any faith to speak of. I think that when I die, it will be a lot like it was before I was born for me. And so I don't really have that hope that maybe other people in my family would have, that I think would provide a lot of comfort in a time like this. And so what I've really tried to do is think about, okay, like this is the time that I have left. What can I do with that? And so what I've chosen to two things. The first is that this is my year of the bucket list. That's what I'm calling it. All the things that I have really wanted to do that I have not done. I'm traveling more often to see my one daughter who lives in Delaware. So where before I might have just thought, okay, we'll see her at the holidays. I don't need to drive out right this minute or whatever. No, I am taking the drive and I am driving to Delaware. My partner and I, when we got married, we were planning on taking a cruise through the Mediterranean, which is something I have always wanted to do. And then COVID happened and we couldn't. And so my parents have been very, very, very generous with us. And so they are sending us on that trip here coming up in a couple of weeks. And so all of the things on that trip that I have wanted to do, I'm doing it. This is my year of saying yes to things that I might not have wanted to try before. I'm taking vacations to places or traveling with my friends to places I might not have thought was that important. I'm eating food that I might not have tried before. I'm telling people how I feel about them, where before sometimes that's a difficult thing to do. In my family, it wasn't something that you do. You don't walk around being mushy and telling people you love them or whatever. But guess what? I am telling people that I love them because it's important that they hear that from my own mouth as often as they can. So this is the year of the bucket list for me, number one. And number two, I have decided that I am going to try and educate as many people as I can about ALS, because I've discovered that even if people know the term ALS or they've heard of Lou Gehrig's disease, they don't know what it is. They don't know why it's important. The only thing people remember when I talk about it to them is that ice bucket challenge that we did several years ago, where everybody was dumping ice water on their heads.
Yeah.
I did that myself. My children, who were young at the time, they did that too, but I didn't know anything really about ALS. I knew it was some kind of disease that people would end up in a wheelchair, but I didn't know anything about it. And so ALS is a disease that kills everybody who has it, and it's not by any means a common disease, but it is for a motor neuron disease, for something that's this awful. It is a disease that's a lot more common than what we would like for it to be. And so if I can get people to care about things, because that's what I have always found. I'm an educator at heart. I really am. And I have always believed that until you understand something or you experience something, you just don't care. I took a trip to India once, like, I don't know, it was probably almost 20 years ago now. And I saw the conditions of a lot of the people there. And some of the people that I was staying with, they told me we were talking about money, and they said something about how they live on about $400 American a year. And I just saw how a lot of them were living and how different it was from my own life. And I thought, it's such a hard way to live. And it just broke my heart to see them struggling with things that here, we just don't even think about, And so as a result of that, I realized that it wasn't that, like I just didn't care about Indians before, but I didn't know really. I didn't know what their lives were like. And so I have tried to sort of translate that understanding a little bit into this journey that I'm on. Most people don't understand what ALS is. They don't know what it looks like. And they don't know that not only is there not a cure, but we don't even really know why it happens in the first place, except for the very small amount of people who have a genetic component. So my goal is to tell people, this is my experience. This is what ALS is. This is why we need to be contributing money to the ALS Association. There's a national organization here in the United States, and then each state also has a local one as well. And they need funding. They need funding to provide care for people who already have ALS. The local ALS organization here in Indiana, they have like a lending closet for some of that equipment that is very, very expensive, that of course people only use for a relatively short amount of time, and then their families don't know what to do with it, right? What do you do with one of those tablets that helps you talk, But also, in addition to like people donating that stuff, there are things that patients need that they are unable to get, things that are just really expensive, and also things that aren't so expensive. It'd be great to have, like accessibility things in your home, but if you can't afford that, or you only have Medicare does not pay for a lot of those things. It comes out of your pocket. And so the organization itself uses some of those funds to provide equipment and things like that. But also we need more research. We need scientists and, like drug companies and so many other professionals. We need them to be able to take the time to do that kind of research, so that as we move forward, people who get that diagnosis don't have to hear 2 to 5 years anymore. And so my goal is to help people understand and help people see me so that they start to care. And when you see that and you start to care and people start to work together, that's when we see change and progress, right? So that's how I'm making it through, because it's not just about me anymore. As I, you and I met each other on TikTok. And so as I started making TikToks, talking a little bit about my experience, and I started out just doing it because I thought, it's a fun way to video. My kids can look back on it when, I'm not around anymore. But I started finding that there are people who have symptoms who are terrified. They're so scared, and they're in the same position that I was. They don't have a diagnosis yet. And, could I have ALS? I get messages all the time. I have these twitchy muscles like what you just made this video about. Does that mean I have ALS? I haven't found a diagnosis. I don't know what it is. Questions all the time from different people because they're so scared and they don't have answers. And so this little, fun thing that started just being little videos for my kids, and I thought, there's all these fun little, I'm not doing any dances, but I'll do, like I'll turn my face into a cartoon or something. I mean, I'll do silly things. It has become a really important way for me to reach out. And also I found a lot of community in that. There are many creators with ALS who are documenting their lives. And now that I have connected with many of them, I feel like I'm not alone. So I can help people who are scared themselves, but also I found a little bit of community in a place that I would have never thought that I would find people who care on TikTok, for heaven's sakes. Yeah. And so helping people to care and helping people who are scared to maybe not feel as scared for at least a little while is really important, because now it's not just about me anymore. It's become this bigger picture, That's how I get through it. It is.
Yeah. Just finding meaning and doing the things that are important, and finding community and recognizing that not everything is all about me. I mean,
that's, you know what? That is such a good thing, because when you're sitting in the middle of it,
yeah,
it does become all about you. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, it didn't happen on purpose, but being able to understand that it's not all about me is what has made the difference for me, I think.
Well, I've said this on the podcast before, and I've heard it from patients over and over again, but being sick is a lonely feeling, right? Because nobody knows, and it can be lonely even when you have a community of people that are going through the same thing.
Sure.
Because nobody knows exactly your experience.
Right. You're the only one living in your own body.
Your body, right? Mm-hmm. But finding people around who have a similar experience, that can really open it up and not make you feel so isolated, because that is true. I mean, you are the only one in your household living with ALS, right? Mm-hmm. That's pretty powerful. And as much of a cesspool as social media can be, it's a really powerful tool that can really open things up. Do you want to say what how people can find you on TikTok, and do you want to tell us where people can donate to the ALS Foundation?
As far as donating, just go into your web browser and type in als.org. And even I think just right at the top, they have a donate button. And you can also look for the ALS organization that is for your state here in the United States. And I think if you have listeners and viewers who do not live in the United States, I think that there are overseas branches as well. And so that's something that I would just encourage you to look for if you don't live here in the States like I do.
Sure.
But I'm looking for my TikTok. So my TikTok name is Rachie Pie. So, but with 1, 2, 3, 4 A's. So it's RAAAACHIEPIE. Rachie Pie on TikTok. I have an Instagram too, which sometimes I use, but I'm better on TikTok. So please, yes, talk to me. I love it when people message me and comment on videos, because like I said, the community is the absolute best part of TikTok for me. So please contact me. I am here and I will support you. And if you're scared, I will talk to you and try and just help you feel like you're not alone, because you're not. There's so many of us out there, and all of us care about each other, and we all pay attention and check in, and it's a really nice feeling to have, knowing that you don't have to be alone. Yeah. It's an easy way to reach out on TikTok. It's really easy.
Yeah. And she'll answer, because look at us.
That's true, I will.
If I show up Will you show me around town? If I make you laugh, will you give me some time? 'Cause I know that a girl like you could be falling in love with just about anyone. All I want is just to know you. It's just to hang around, walk on the same ground. You remind me of the days gone by.
I'd like to talk a little bit about what are you expecting in the next year or so, and how do you expect that you'll handle things as they come?
So you mean as far as disease progression?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
So when I went to my first clinic visit in January, my lung capacity was at 85%. And when I went again in April, it was 62%. So I anticipate this year that we will probably start dealing with some of that non-invasive breathing help. Also, like I said, I'm losing weight faster than, it doesn't seem to matter how much food I cram into my mouth. I still have lost about, 40 pounds maybe, or 45 pounds since January.
Is that typical too?
So I know that people with ALS have a higher caloric need than an average person. I've had it explained to me that living with ALS or doing a task with ALS is sort of like, for an average person, walking up a hill against a headwind. It takes a lot more energy to accomplish the same thing. For me, I find that's true as well, because so many of my muscles are weaker, or just don't work at all. And so, for example, the back pain that I was having, they told me that part of that was because I was starting to walk with my hips a little bit instead of walking the way that a normal person walks. So it is typical that that people with ALS start losing weight. So for me, I have been trying to talk to my doctor about putting a feeding tube into my stomach so that I can have nutrition running overnight for myself, which would then mean that I could just during the day eat the things that I want to eat in the quantities that I want to eat them, and not have to worry as much about nutrition as just enjoying the food that I have, right? So
how has that conversation gone with the doc? I just my experience of very limited experience, but my experience has been the feeding tube conversation comes up when somebody's not able to swallow anymore, or they start aspirating.
Right, certainly, and that is something that I will face regardless of whether I have this put in, but it's a quality of life issue for me.
Totally. It makes total sense.
So I brought it up to my doctor. So the ALS clinics are really, really cool. So they put you in a room and you have like 10 or 12 doctors just cycle through to see you. So every time I go to the clinic, I see a neurologist, I see speech therapy, occupational, physical, I see nutrition, I see pharmacy, I see respiratory. So I see all of those people every single time. And so when I saw them in April, I said to them, hey, I've noticed that I've been losing weight. I'm concerned about it because I feel like I'm eating all the time and I'm trying to eat higher caloric foods. So I'd really like to talk about putting in that G-tube. So a G-tube is a tube that goes into your stomach. And then they also have like a J-tube, which goes a little bit lower into your intestines. And so those are different than the feeding tubes that you tend to see a lot of times that kind of go up through your nose. That's an NG tube, a nasogastric tube. And so that goes through your nose, down your esophagus, and into your stomach. I don't want one like that. Those are much more difficult to maintain. And, like you have to
Not
replace
comfy.
them often. So I am pushing for the G tube that can go into my stomach. We'll see. They said they might have to move it a little bit lower just because of some other complications. But when I mentioned it to them in April, speech was on board with me, and nutrition was on board with me, but my neurologist was not so much. So he said, well, let's kind of just think about it. And at your next appointment, we can talk about it. Well, my next appointment isn't until the end of July. And I have, like I said, now lost like 40 pounds or something. And so I've been bothering them a little bit more. So I'm hoping that maybe I can have that put in after my vacation to the Med, and I'll come back and they can pop that little guy in. And then that way, like I said, they can feed me everything that I need overnight, and then I don't have to worry. And also you can put your pills into it. And I hate taking pills. Sometimes they get stuck. I do have some swallow issues. And so the idea of being able to like shove every single pill that I have to take now, right into that tube. Oh, I'm telling you, Cody, it's so exciting. It's everything that I've ever dreamed of. So, so I'm hoping that I can get that done this summer. But, I've gotten to the point where sometimes sitting straight up means that it's harder for me to breathe. I need a little time to kind of recline. And so if I don't have that as an option, it's causes me a lot of anxiety, and then I start hyperventilating. And so, so I'm talking to my doctors now about, can we just have some oxygen here just to help kind of relieve some of that, anxiety. So those are all things that I'm looking toward in the next couple of months. My breathing capacity got quite a bit worse from January to April. And I figure by the time I get to July, I anticipate it being worse yet. And so the problem with some of those other things, like putting in that G tube, is that if they're going to sedate you, they don't want to, if they're afraid you're not going to be able to get, enough air and oxygen into your system. And so I'm feeling some anxiety with that, and maybe not being able to get this treatment that I think is so necessary. So I don't know. I talked to him today and I'm pushing him on it. So those are the changes that I see for myself coming up. I anticipate that I will become weaker in my legs and I'll spend more time in my chair. I've got a brand new spiffy chair that's being made specifically for me that I am so grateful for and can't wait to have. So it's really funny when the things that you get excited by. I'm excited for a month-to-month Zofran subscription or prescription, and I am excited about this new wheelchair that's coming, and I'm excited about having a surgery to put a tube into my intestines so that I don't have to eat any. Those are all very odd things to be excited about, but I feel like quality of life for all of them is going to improve a lot. So, and in the meantime, I'm going to try and travel as much as I can and visit my friends as much as I can until I can't do it anymore. And I've discovered that now when I'm typing on my phone, instead of bothering to sit down at my computer, my hands start to, they get really jittery and shaky. I lose a lot of the dexterity that's required to, let me tell you that if autocorrect was not a thing, I would not be able to communicate online at all, because my precision and dexterity in my hands has begun to deteriorate a little bit. And as your nerves are dying, they get a little confused. And So they kind of start sending messages maybe when they shouldn't be, or other stimuli might trigger that nerve to fire off. And so you get these like little twitches in your muscles, and those are signs that your muscles are dying, which, you know, is kind of a scary thing as you're experiencing those and you're watching your muscles like jump around, you know. And so I went until, I don't know, like the last month or so, only having those twitches in my legs and not having them anywhere else. And now I'm starting to experience them in my arms a little bit, my abdomen. And so I know that those changes are happening. I know what that means, and that I need to anticipate becoming less mobile and less, I don't know, less able to do the things that I want to do. So I know these changes that happen in the long term, and I know what to expect. Looking at them in the short term is sort of the scary part. When you get a new symptom that you haven't had before, you know, it's just scary, and it makes you think about the changes that are happening and the direction that, you know, my body is moving.
I keep having this thought that you're experiencing all these things that I guess not everybody's going to have these particular things, but I mean, all of us will have at some point, if we're lucky and live a long time, we'll have these kind of little losses along the way, mm-hmm. right? Like eventually I won't be able to run, and eventually I won't be able to, you know, lift the weights that I want to lift, or take the hikes that I want to hike, or, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's just prolonged, and you're having all these things happen in a really short period of time. And the amount of acceptance that you're having to do is really tremendous. The other thought that I had was the fact that you can take that acceptance and then just flip it around. I mean, earlier when you were saying about like falling into your front door, the immediate emotion that I felt was anger and frustration. Like I would have just been pissed that I'd fallen, and that I would have wanted to break something. I mean, and I'm not really an angry person, mm-hmm. but I know that I would have been frustrated and angry at that. And the fact that you can be thinking about placing a G-tube and find some excitement in it,
right?
Be getting a wheelchair and find some excitement in it, although it sounds really cool.
Oh, it's going to be great. This is really top tier wheelchair we're talking about here. Let me tell you, they measured me for it, and they took me all through. What are the features you need? This thing will boost me up like a whole foot, so I could cook, you know, like cut things on my countertops again. Oh boy, I'm telling you.
I'm not really in the market for a wheelchair, but
hey, if you ever are, I probably won't need mine anymore. So just, you know.
I'm just thinking that, you know, you're doing a lot of accepting of what's happening, mm-hmm. and by necessity, right? I mean, right. There's a real choice here to find the joy and the excitement in the things that are coming your way, which I think we can more easily do as we age in our typical progression. It's easier to kind of accept those things and find the joy in the progression of life as it typically happens. But in this accelerated rate, the way that you're accepting these things, I just kind of want to give you a high five.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's... You know,
look, do I wish that this wasn't happening? Of course I wish it wasn't happening. Sure. I mean, it's not like I'm this... superhuman, like, you know, yeehaw, let's go, boys. I mean, like, you know, I do wish it wasn't happening. I would give a lot of things to be able to go back to the regular life that I had planned before, you know. It's just that you can't do anything about it. All the wishing in the world, all the crying in the world, and, you know, all the being angry at this disease in the world isn't going to take it away. And I certainly have those moments, you know, and I would never, ever criticize anybody who was sitting in that, because this is just a diabolical disease that steps in and destroys everything, you know? And so I think being angry at it is a natural, you know, feeling. And I have that when things don't go my way. You know, like I used to be able to sit on the floor and get into my bottom cabinets, and then I could kind of like squat my way back up, and maybe I might have to hold on to something to do it. I can't do that anymore. And I remember when I started falling and wasn't able to, I had to crawl across my house to find a piece of furniture that was low enough that I could boost myself up so that I could even just get to, you know, like to get so that I could use my walker. And I was mad. Boy, I was just so mad. Like I don't deserve this, you know, like I'm a nice person, you know, I try and contribute to society. I'm young. I'm 47. We don't say 47, we say 34. So I am very young for an ALS diagnosis. Most people aren't diagnosed until they're in their 60s or 70s. And normally, even when you look at the research, they make about 50 years old as like the low end of typical diagnosis. And so I was 46 when I was diagnosed, and you know, it just comes out of nowhere and punches you in the gut. And so there are times when I am mad. There are times when I just bury my head into my partner's shoulders and cry and talk about how mad I am about all these things that I will miss out on, you know. And gosh, everybody has moments like that. And for me, I've gotten to the point where, like I said, I've talked about it enough with people and I have processed it myself. And I am a verbal processor, so talking about it makes things so much easier for me. You know, but you just have days that are bad days, and I'm mad sometimes. I just am. It's not fair. It's not fair. I don't think anybody should have to deal with that, but you know, for me personally, gosh, it just sucks. So, you know, but what can you do? You have to move on. You have to, you know, like wake up the next morning and try and do as much as you can. And for me, I figured I could be miserable and go through this process angry and, you know, depressed and sad all the time, or I could try and move forward and enjoy the time that I have for as long as I have it. And that's why we created the Year of the Bucket List. And you know, like being sad and angry and miserable is miserable. And I already have all of this really, really hard stuff that I have to deal with. I would rather not deal with adding my own stuff on top of it, because I can't choose the ALS. The ALS is here and I can't do anything about that now. But I can choose what my perspective is going to be and how to then move on. You know, like, okay, I'm mad right now. You know, I'm storming, or no, I'm not storming anymore. I'm rolling around in my wheelchair and I am, you know, like crying at my partner and talking about how unfair this is. And okay, you know, like you have to do those things, but then you have to take a breath and you have to move forward. What can I still accomplish? What can I still do for myself? Who can I spend time with? You know, what can I do that I can enjoy so that those memories are there? My daughter and I are making like a funeral scrapbook. So with all the pictures of me, of course, because who wouldn't want to look at this face? You know, and if you're just listening to the audio, I'm sorry that you're missing out on it, but this face is something else. You might want to go onto YouTube and see if you can find it, or join my TikTok so you can see how, I mean, like, it's just
there
really
you go.
something. Anyway, so we're working on that together, and I'm working on trying to remember to take pictures of myself that aren't selfies, because those are things that I want to go on. You know, I want my family to remember the time that we had, and I want them to be able to show me, or, you know, and our lives together, show them to other people and talk about me and remember me. And, you know, like, initially when I am gone, that's going to be so incredibly painful for them. But over time, you know, those memories become good memories and funny memories again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want to focus on those things. And so, you know, part of trying to be positive and not live in that sadness is because I know how that affects the people around me. I don't want my children to look back on my last few years and remember me as angry and critical and, you know, upset all the time. I want them to remember me having a good time and telling jokes and, you know, spending time together doing things that are fun. And I don't think that I would be able to do those things if I was going to feel sorry for myself all the time. But I just really have been trying to, year of the bucket list, fill my life with so many good things that all of those bad things and all of those things that I'm afraid of, you know, as we move forward, all of those things are overwhelmed by the positive things and the joy and the love that I do have in my life. And I'm just going to focus on that, because that's what I want my life to be in the end, not laying in bed feeling sad. I want to be focused on everybody that I love and who loves me back. And that made just an enormous switch for me, that life is good. And you know what? In some ways, life is better. I mean, like, it's not, I mean, ALS sucks. It sucks. And there's nothing that can be done about that. But the intentionality that all of us have spent, oh, look, can you see? There's my puppy right there.
Yeah, I see.
The intentionality that all of us have really put into life to spend time together,
Right.
is we spend so much more time together than we used to. And it's, you know, some of them are silly. You know, my mom will bring me a pizza and we'll just sit there and, you know, talk or whatever. And she said to me, you know, when I broke my hip and I was in the hospital for about 2 weeks, and I was in rehab for 2.5 before I threw a giant fit and said, let me go home. And, my mom said to me, you know, I would never have wanted this to happen, but it's so nice that I just get to sit here and talk to you, and there's like nothing else. There's no other distractions. There's no other things that we need to be doing. I mean, for 2 weeks, my mom was at the hospital every single day, and we just sat there and chatted. You know, sometimes about nothing and sometimes about things that are just really important. And those type of experiences are things that I probably would not have had without the ALS, or I wouldn't have had them until something else required us to be that kind of intentional. You know, as my mom, you know, as she would start to get sick maybe, and she would have to go into palliative care or something. And then all of a sudden you realize how important those people are in your life, and you spend that time. And so, as awful as it is, and you're looking down the lane, you know, of your life, and it's getting shorter and closer to the end, still, I'm telling you, Cody, like, my life has been really enriched by the fact that there's an end date that's much faster. And so now I have to do the things that I want to do. I have to love the people that I want to love and I have to do it as hard as I can because I don't have that much time. And so I feel sort of lucky that the opportunity has been given to me to be able to deepen the relationships with people that I care about and like pick up relationships with people that I haven't spoken to in years. And now they're people that I talk to who come over to my house, who, like spend time. That would not have happened without the ALS and without me being willing to talk about it all the time and raise that awareness. It was hard for me to make the decision to make an announcement, but I'm so glad that I did. And I'm grateful for the things that have been enriching in my life as a result of that.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, we don't get to choose the cards that we're dealt, but we get to choose how we play the cards we're dealt. And that really is what you're doing. You get to choose who you want to be and how you want to be, how you want to show up. I commend you for that. And I appreciate what you're saying about, appreciating the things that have happened since you've been diagnosed. And something I've said on the podcast before, and I guess I'm going to say it again now, is we don't have to wait, right? I don't have to wait until I'm sick to make these kinds of changes.
Yes.
To show up and be the person that I want to be. And I have the opportunity now because I am dying. I am going to die at some point. And I can choose right now to be the person I want to be right now.
Yes.
And I don't want you to have ALS, but I appreciate the fact that you've chosen to show up and be who you're being right now.
Someday I will be weaker than I am now, and I still won't know everything. But when I'm passing up and over the clouds, I hope that you'll have learned from me. Someday you will be stronger than you are now, but you will not know everything. When the water's spilling over the bow, you'll still have me in the wings. You gotta get up.
I want to ask just a couple more things.
Okay.
How long do you think that you'll live?
That's a hard question. Some days I think I'm going to live a really, really long time. I have a great day. I'm feeling really good. I was able to do some things that maybe I can't always do. And I think it's great. Other days, when I experience a new symptom, or today I got a call from the clinic that the prescription that they prescribed me in April, Medicare did not approve it. They didn't think my numbers were good enough to take this medication, and so they denied it. I can't afford it myself, so it's just something that I can't do. And so, I'm faced with looking at, and none of the ALS medications stretch your life out for a very long time. I mean, we're talking weeks or maybe months, but to have, here's something that could have helped me, and it has been taken away by a random person who isn't my physician and doesn't know me or my situation or anything. And so I had to look at that. And fortunately, my occupational therapist happened to be at the house when they called. And so, I cried at her for I don't know, half an hour. It's just, like here's something that was going to extend my life. And now I've lost that. And so at moments like that, I said to her this afternoon, like, I have all these things planned for this year. What if I can't do them? What if I'm gone by the end of this year? I don't know. And to be honest, most days I have chosen to not think about that. How long do I have? Doesn't matter. What matters is now and what I can accomplish now. I know that things are going to change. I know that I'm going to get to the point where I can't do those things. I don't know how long it's going to be, and worrying about it doesn't help. And so I don't know. I don't know how long it's going to be. And most of the time I don't care. I just care about today.
Great answer.
Thanks.
The last question I always ask everybody is, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a person who gave a crap. I mean, to be sort of as blunt as possible, I want to be remembered as somebody who cared about other people and who cared, mostly about other people. So I care about how do situations affect people? How do relationships affect people? What can I do, maybe to help somebody have a little bit of an easier time or a nicer day? Or I think there was a point in my life where I was miserable and I helped make the people around me miserable too. And if you were to talk to my children about that time, they would 100% agree with that statement. What I want people to remember is that I care about them and I care about their circumstance, and that if I could do something to help, I would do that thing. I want to be remembered as a person who cares. And I think that's, it's what we all want, right? Is for somebody to care about us and to care about the things that matter to us. And I want to be that person for everybody who meets me. I want them to feel like I care about them.
I love it. Okay. Well, I feel like we could talk. I feel like I have questions that could take up another hour. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, no, I
really
appreciate you letting me be
so
on your
great.
podcast. I'm so happy to be on the same podcast as Nurse Julie. Let me tell you, that is like a dream come true because I love her so much. She's honestly, Nurse Julie, she made a big difference for me. She did a couple of TikToks, I think, about patients with ALS. And I told you that like dying by not being able to breathe is terrifying to me. I try not to think about it as often as I, like as much as possible. She made a TikTok and she said like a lot of times when people are dying, they have ALS, like they're not breathing, and that causes so much anxiety, and they might not have a lot of pain because ALS itself doesn't cause a lot of pain. It's just, not having support in your joints and stuff. So we will medicate them for pain, but also we're going to give them as much medication as they need to be calm and peaceful and not be sitting in that anxiety. And, I have worked with hospice patients for a pretty long time myself, but to hear her say that relieved so much of the fear that I had been carrying around. And so I have a special little place in my heart for Nurse Julie. She improved my life just through that one thing. Yeah. Yeah, she's wonderful.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
Thank you. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel, for such a fantastic conversation. You're living out what I've said from the beginning of this podcast. Serious illness has a way of clarifying what's important. You're finding what's important, and not only that, but the rate at which you're experiencing loss, grieving it, and accepting it, and then pivoting back to what's important is impressive. Next week, I'll spend some time reflecting on this interview. Until then, thanks to Rachel, and thank you for listening. As Rachel mentioned, if you want to find out more about how to support ALS research or learn more about the disease, you can visit the ALS Association website at als.org. And we'll link to Rachel's TikTok in the show notes. There she talks about her illness, and she is sometimes silly, and it's a lot of fun. As she said in the interview, she loves to interact, and it would be a great way to get to know her better. If you enjoy the Dying to Tell You podcast and believe in our mission to demystify death and dying and to help people live more thoughtful and intentional lives, here are some ways you can join us in that mission. Subscribe and leave a good review on your preferred podcast platform. Follow us on social media, all of which can be found on our website, dttypodcast.com. Thirdly, word of mouth is one of the most powerful ways of spreading the message. Text the link to this episode to one or two people that you love. And thank you for considering joining us on this mission. As always, if you or a loved one is living with a life-limiting illness and would be willing to share your story, please contact us on our website, dttypodcast.com, and click the Share Your Story link. This is Dying to Tell You.